you very much. Perhaps it's like 45 years ago that I came to this campus. So I'm like Rip Van Winkle, coming back to Hyderabad and coming to this campus. The world has changed all around us. I see here today many or some who know my father, who have shared with me some very fond memories of their interactions with him. I also see some who came to my wedding. I'm seeing them after about 35 years, 40 years, 38 years. And I see some who were students of my mother. So it's nice to be back in Hyderabad. So I'd like to thank Manthan for giving me the opportunity to follow one of my very good friends and colleagues, Ambassador Venkatesh Verma, who started off this discussion of foreign policy in Hyderabad. So there is a joke now in Delhi that suddenly issues of foreign policy and comments are being made from Hyderabad, where Delhi, everybody is thinking what's these two Hyderabadis trying to set the agenda for issues relating to foreign policy. It's just that Hyderabad has produced many outstanding administrators. Two of us ventured into the foreign service, and now it's our time to come back and try and give something to this city which has given so much to us. So I'll try and speak for about 30 minutes, and I must confess I'm neither academic nor a public intellectual, so I will use pictures to try and depict where my words fail me, because perhaps they say a picture speaks more than 1,000 words. So get ready for about 20 pictures, which means 20,000 words, and my own words. Perhaps Manthan doesn't know this. Never give a diplomat a microphone, because then you're in for trouble. So let the trouble begin. Many of you know what is perhaps the most distinguishing feature of our times. It's called by different names. Some call it globalization, some call it connectivity, some others call it interdependence. And this has been evolving for quite some time. It's not new. While it is a distinguishing feature of our times, which would mean the last 30, 40, 50 years, but it's been in the making for a long time. It's of course expanded exponentially and accelerated considerably. So I just wanted to show you a brief graph which shows how globalization has increased. Now of course this very graph, as academics will know, is a matter of debate, that does trade show is trade reflective of globalization? But let's leave that aside. The idea being that in the last 50 years the growth of interdependence or connectivity or globalization has just kept on growing, and by that I meant 50 years, basically starting from the 70s, because 40s were the period of when the World War ended and a new system or a new world order came in, and it took some time to establish and start moving. So 50 to 60, some even say 70 years has been the period when interconnectedness or globalization has just gone on and on and on until recently. So let's not debate about the graph, but let's just see the trend, and the big trend is pretty clear. So what does it say? Some people say that for every 10% increase in trade exposure, there is a impact on the GDP of about 3 to 4%. May be correct, may not be correct, but there is a impact. What do we see in those 60 years as the broad trends? We see that extreme poverty is receding. We also see that millions have broken through the vicious cycle of hunger and undernourishment. We see that life expectancy has surged, and we see millions upon millions, even billions receiving education,
and expecting a better life than their previous generations. And much needed technology, innovation, investment have come from different parts of the globe where we never anticipated. That's broadly the trend. And academics like diplomats start off with one thing and then start with a but. So, while the trend is on the upswing, this is what is called the elephant curve. Basically, what it shows is that while interconnectivity has increased, globalization is widespread, there is discontent with globalization. Discontent because of the consequences in some areas, adverse effects in other areas. Why discontent? Because of inequality of income, inequity in growth in almost every country. Now, there are various people who come up with various interpretations, and they say, but the broad thinking is that the share of the upper half of every country, of every society, and perhaps the first 10%, some even say the first 1%, is tended to be disproportionately higher than the rest. And therefore, as you can see, there it's going, and if you see the elephant snout there, it's exponentially growing. But the elephant's tail, it's still very low. And the idea being that while the median is all right and it's growing up, the snout is going rapidly and the tail remains where it is, and in fact by comparison lower. So globalization is the norm or is the distinguishing feature of our times, but so is discontent with it. So let me try and encapsulate for you what a very famous American author said about the period before globalization, and that is the period before I was in Hyderabad. He said Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was still a sound that birds made. Today all of you know Twitter as something else. But when I was studying here, when I came last to Vidyaranya, Twitter was something only birds did, not humans. The cloud was supposed to be in the sky, but today the cloud means something else. All of you who are of au fait with technology know that cloud means immediately thinking goes to something else. What else? LinkedIn. Many of you are on LinkedIn, but for people of my generation, when I first went to New York, LinkedIn was a prison. Today, it is one of the most sophisticated tools of connectivity and so on the social media. What else is there? Apps. Apps were when we were applying for colleges. That's what we applied, applications, etc. and all. Today, apps mean something different. And Skype. Skype, obviously there was no such thing when I learnt English about Skype. If somebody would have written Skype, we would have said it's a typographical error. But the world has changed. So Thomas Friedman, he actually coined this thing to say, this is what the world was before globalization. I belong to that era. Many of you belong to the present era of globalization and are au fait with it. So I just thought I'll tell you how words have changed, how vocabulary has changed, how our lives have changed. Now, for many years, we were all told, as we were growing up, we have a very eminent economists here, and they would vouch when I said we were told that a world of global networks and interdependence, connecting countries intimately through supply chains, through finances, made war obsolete. They said, there was a very good example when I joined the Foreign Service. They said, countries with McDonald's don't fight wars with each other. I mean, McDonald's was the symbol of globalization everywhere. And if you have two countries with McDonald's, you don't fight a war. The last time India fought a war with Pakistan was when one of us didn't have McDonald's. That was the thinking. But let's go further. while we were all enjoying the benefits of globalization, and there are considerable benefits, we all acknowledge there are considerable benefits to each of us, there were some canaries which were chirping in the coal mine. And what is a canary in the coal mine? A canary is a coal mine. Why did miners take canaries? Because the canary's gullet or equivalent to it is smaller than the human beings. So when you go down the coal mine, the canary dies first before you start getting the adverse effects of carbon monoxide and other noxious gases. So every miner or a group of miners carried canaries, and if the canary was chirping and dying, get out of here, it's time. While we were enjoying all this, there were canaries in the coal mine who were dying, but all of us were enjoying the benefits of globalization, so we didn't see. So I'll just give you a few examples, and all of you will relate to some or the other of who were the canaries in the last 10-15 years while all of us were enjoying the benefits of globalization. So I don't know whether you heard of this term called Stuxnet. Stuxnet. I used to be in the IAEA, and Ambassador Verma was India's nuclear negotiator, so we know this very well. But nobody else knew this. Largely, I'm certain there are some people who would know. Stuxnet was a computer worm, a virus. It was introduced, it was apparently started sometime in 2005 to 2009, they perfected it. 2010, it was introduced into industrial installations in Iran with the goal of stopping their nuclear program. What happens if what it did was it went into several nuclear establishments, created a problem for the computers, stopped including a centrifuge plant for enrichment, and it did its job. Nobody raised it, neither the Iranians, because they didn't want to discuss this, nor those who introduced this. It is said to be introduced by the US and Israel. Nobody has claimed that it did its job, it was successful. The Iranians came running to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and said, hey, look what's happened to our thing, etc. They checked the safety and said, well, it's safe, but the plant itself has been damaged in such a way that it puts back your entire approach. Now, supposing this was not Stuxnet and a cyber weapon, if a country would have gone and done this in terms of conventional manner, the whole world would have jumped in and said, what are you doing? How can you do this to a infrastructural installation? Because critical infrastructure, if you damage it, is considered an act of war. Yet nobody bothered about it. It worked, functioned well, did its job, we all kept quiet. 2010. This is much later. Google was in bed with Huawei for a long time. They were amongst the closest of partners who were cooperating. For years they built a very successful partnership because Huawei was building phones for China and cheaper phones for the rest of the world. Google was a platform which had an operating system until the president of the US decided that I need to do something. So all he did was he issued some regulations saying that for XYZ, Huawei cannot use American technology. So sitting in the White House or sitting in San Jose, Google issued instructions, regulations that you cannot do. Any other partnership of a commercial nature, if this had happened, everybody would have jumped up and said, hey, what are you doing? This is there is so much damage to us, etc. Because it was a Chinese company, it was, well, no, let them do it. So what were you doing? You weaponized cyberspace once. you then decided to weaponize regulations. All was done was change in regulations. So what were you doing? You can, by change in regulation, by using cyberspace, you could do damage which others cannot see. Let's take another one. Look at this. Many of you, Hyderabad is a city where migrants flourish. Many have gone from here all over the world. Every Hyderabadi, they say, in Chicago there is a Chicago Sharif. In Jeddah there is a Hyderabad Sharif, because there are large number of Hyderabadis all over the world. So what happened? And migration is a normal human mobility instinct. For hundreds of years people have been migrating. So let's see what happened in 2015. There was, as you know, difficulties in Syria, so people wanted to run away. So Turkey, which is the country of a transit nature, people were going from there. Turkey said, all of you go ahead, go to Europe. And then the Europeans were worried, hey, these 3 million guys or 4 million guys are going to come all of here. So they went to Turkey and said, can you stop it? They worked out a deal, $3 billion or something, that migrants should not move from Turkey. So look at the statistics, how they were increasing. In 2015, there were a huge number of migrants going from Syria, transiting via Turkey into Europe. And there is a sign there of the deal in, I think, right, March 2016, right. After that, look at the numbers. So you could use migrants as a tap. You can use it when you want to open it, you can use it when you close. None of us bothered. The Europeans were paying the Turks, they were happy, the Turks were happy that they were. So what was happening was, you were weaponizing migration. When you want, start it. When you don't want, hold it. Let me go to example number 4, trade. And these are very interesting examples of trade. I don't know how many of you know about a country called Lithuania. Lithuania is a small country in Europe, far away from China. Like many countries, China is the major trade partner for more than 130 countries, and Lithuania also it was. Lithuania made a mistake. What it did was, it saw, hey, India has a representative office of the Taiwanese, XYZ have, hundreds of them have, let me also have one. And in their domestic politics, when it started going, they made one error. All the others called it Taipei representative office or mission. The Lithuanians thought, let's call it Taiwan representative office and mission. Taipei was the capital city. Taiwan is supposed to be a reflection of a larger entity. I don't know whether country or not, this depends on how you see international politics. I don't want to tread in that area, but not a city. So they started calling it Taiwan representation office. Immediately China said, many of you, some of you may be doing business, there are, what are these codes, HP codes or something like this, for trade. They said anything with origin in Lithuania, not allowed into China. Now you may think that Lithuania is a small country, okay, it has some problems, that's what the Lithuanians also thought, until they realized Volkswagen, it is being assembled in Slovak Republic and in Germany, etc., but it has small, if you look at its wheels, the inner rim of the wheels is done by a company called Continental. Now Continental makes those rims in Lithuania. So China said, if you want to export Volkswagen from Europe to China, certify that it is not made in Lithuania. So in one go, the relationship started souring. They went to the WTO and all, it's going on, but what was China doing? Basically it was weaponizing trade. So All this we are watching. None of us is what we are seeing. These are disparate elements. Somebody is doing X, somebody is doing Y, somebody is doing Z. But suddenly it became that products from EU were having all sorts of roadblocks in China, and the EU was telling the Lithuanians, look, we can't fight too much for you, we will go to the court, etc., but you work out a deal. So the Lithuanians trying to look a work around, etc. For some time they found a workaround. They found that they will say not produced in Lithuania, but they said services for the wheel are provided in Lithuania. So you don't have to show it as origin, place of origin, because service is not counted in trade in goods. It took some time, they sold some more, it again got into a problem. So the point I'm just wanting to make is, small little things can cause major damages in an interconnected world. Trade can be used as a weapon too. This one you know, I think, social media, all of us use social media. So I just want to give an example, because I've told about the US, I've told about China, I've told about other countries, Turkey, etc. Let's talk about what the Russians did. It's good to know, because as they say in rather familiar thing, that in the bathroom everybody is naked. So this is the Blacks Lives Matter. This was a internal US issue of a policeman killing a black person, and large amount of social unrest there. And people were noticing that from Africa there are large number of social posts coming in, talking about the fascist police in the US. And it was looking like this was like a black awakening moment, etc., targeted towards the US administration and all, when they started seeing that where is this coming from? Why are people in Ghana, or people in Nigeria, or people in smaller African countries, why are they suddenly woke up to this issue? And they found that there are troll factories in Ghana and Nigeria, and the funding from that is coming in rubles. I will leave it because you will know what it means. Let's look at something else. Climate. All of us are worried about climate. EU is supposed to be one of the biggest votaries of a clean environment, an environment that needs to ensure that that global warming doesn't proceed the way it is, and to try and keep the temperature low. What did the EU do? I don't know. Again, those of who are dealing with business will know. They have a carbon border adjustment mechanism. So what does this mechanism do? It says in EU we make steel, I'm just giving an example, maybe cement, they have identified some products, I think those products are there. In those we make all this, the carbon footprint of this per kilogram of steel or iron ore is X. If any of you countries do more, you will pay a tax, because you are polluting the environment. So what they were doing is using climate to profiteer, because otherwise they are scared that their companies will go off somewhere else, you will buy cheaper from somewhere else. So they decided, let's use the CBAM and equalize everything. In another way, they are just profiteering from climate and ensuring that their companies become sort of viable compared to products which would otherwise be cheaper, whether it's from Turkey or from Russia, India also, I think. If you go down that list, we are also there, but many countries. So basically, again, what you see is all these efforts. So let's try and summarize where we are on all this. So these are all facets of punitive unilateral measures. Whether they are US cyber attacks, or Chinese trade bullying, or Russian trolling, or Turkish tapping of migrants, or EU profiteering from climate. These are not random incidents. While we thought these were random incidents, actually what was being done is that people were testing new types of weaponry, and that weaponry was to exploit chinks in our interconnectedness, because you buy from somebody, you sell from somebody, you use a product from somewhere, you sell to somebody, you all have become interconnected because the global world is one, etc. and all. And each of these countries or efforts or the examples that I gave was waging a conflict by manipulating the very things that link them together. So while we were saying it's good, I pick up my iPhone and press it and see, hey, I can talk to my friend somewhere. WhatsApp can also be used for some other things. So the only point that I'd like to make here is that the things that were linking you together could also be used for other forms of, they could become instruments which are sharp, which can hurt you. And we didn't see this because we were all so engrossed in looking at only the benefits of globalization. Now, I want to put a caveat here that coercion is not new. I mean, states do coercion all the time. It's not new. But what was new was that the hidden wiring of globalization being used to target other countries was what was new. And the deadliness and effectiveness was new. You could sit in your house, you could change regulations, you could be in a troll farm somewhere and impact with devastating effect somewhere else. And what was being done is that conflict, which was usually war, this is something somebody else does, it's fought on the border, it's there, it doesn't happen to me here in Hyderabad, I have no border, there's somewhere else happening. It started becoming mainstream. So from periphery you could start, these things were becoming mainstream and impacting the center. And connectivity itself, basically, if you look at all these examples and sit back and see, connectivity is being weaponized. So when you visualize conflict, all of you just close for half a minute, 15 seconds. What is conflict to you? You look at conflict and you see who has more troops, who has more soldiers, who has more guns, who have more armies, who has more weaponry. So purely in numerical terms, you look at conflict through military numericals. You look at tanks, soldiers as weapons of war. That's the normal visualization of war. Let's look at what are weapons of connectivity. So in that one photo, everything is depicted that I told you. Trade is a weapon of connectivity. We've now seen how banking and financial services, which are supposed to be global public goods, everybody can use them, you can join, use us, this bank will give you that interest, etc. It can be weaponized. Technologies can be weaponized. We've seen in the examples that I gave. Airspace can be weaponized. You cannot travel from this side, you will not be allowed to fly from there, etc. Energy can be weaponized. All forms of resources can be weaponized. Currency can be weaponized. I will not get into the details, but all I am saying is start visualizing conflict in a different manner, not purely as what happens on the battlefield. And that's the broader issue that we need to take away from. Again, weapons of connectivity. So in place of tanks, now once the US decided that it will not have economic exchanges, all the big companies decided that they will leave. Starbucks said I will leave, IKEA said I will leave. You name any big company, top 400 companies in the world, all said we don't want to stay here. It was not a business decision only, it's a strategic decision. They decided that this is no longer a place for us to do business, let's move. 1 month ago this was, but now it's not. What is happening is good. What is also happening is, so okay, business, trade, economics, but now You want to play sports? No, you can't play. If you've done something which is, I feel, very wrong, you can't play. So, Russia cannot participate in the FIFA World Cup. So, because all those who feel strongly have joined together and said, no, you cannot participate. Hey, but I qualified. Sorry, you need to qualify through another yardstick also. You qualified on one yardstick in the playing field, but there are other yardsticks that you need to qualify for. You don't qualify for that. Or some of Russia's best known cultural icons or singers, Bolshoi theatre, whatever. You can only now, individuals or groups can perform only if you say you are not with the actions of your country and your president. If you don't say it, you cannot. So, look at how there is no war declared between some of these countries, yet look what is happening. So, in places of tanks and planes, new weapons are regulations, standards, transit controls, supply chains. I mean, we have gone through all this, social media, monetary policies, financial systems, all are weaponized. Now, again, let me put a caveat, sanctions are not new. In fact, if you are a student of history and you read one of the oldest books on international relations, which is called The History of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, you will find that in 1432 he said sanctions are there. It is just the breadth of sanctions, the exponential nature of sanctions, and theoretically there was no declaration of war between some of these countries and Russia, yet you have this and in play. Now, this is what is a non-military coercive numerical. Look at those things and how they have changed fundamentally from 22nd of February to now. More than 5,000 sanctions have been, they call them sanctions, I call them unilateral punitive measures, for the simple reason they don't have sanctity in international law. They do have the backing of their national law, yes, and in case of the European Union, the regional regulations, but there is nothing in international law that says that others have to obey it. But look at those numbers, how they have exponentially increased. What was there till February 22nd was about 3,000 something, now 5,000 more have been added. In 40 days, you have so many measures that are done, and not one bullet has been fired by the country there against Russia. So, what does this all mean for us? I mean, that is what I want to bring you back. You understood the big picture. What does this mean? So, here is Mr. Larry Fink. He is the CEO of BlackRock. BlackRock, for those of you who may not know, has assets worth $10 trillion being invested all over the world. This is what he said. In today's world, I am not going to even challenge what happened. No speculation. Right. I mean, they will try and fix it, but let me try and see if I can bring you back to where we are. What I want to say is that you don't need to be a soldier, you don't need to have aeroplanes, you don't need to fire from them. These can be done effectively by strokes of the pen. So, what you perhaps need are economists, you need administrators to administrate it, you need diplomats to talk about it, you need technical and administrative apparatus rather than only military prowess. And that is why I took this rather long way to explain to you that things are changing. I see that it is slowly coming back. Right. So, he said that there is an end of globalization, and so what does this mean to all of us? Because the defining or distinguishing characteristic of our lives has been greater and greater globalization, interdependence, etc. and all. So, what does this mean? Right. We all know what disruption by war means, right? Let me quickly say. It means destruction of life and property, they will take over some places, etc. It means breach of international law. We are seeing it repeatedly told. X country breached international law and Y country is now totally violative of international law. It means undermining global institutions because they are based on a charter which has certain requirements to be followed and you don't do it, so that it is. And it has economic impacts. This is the conventional consequences of disruption by war. Then there are humanitarian consequences. There is misery, there is refugees, there is human life being lost, etc., etc. What does disrupting globalization means? So, can somebody tell me what is now the definition of war? When I studied international relations, I was told war starts with a declaration of war. Then the belligerents attack each other, fight against each other. There is nothing happening here. There are two countries attacking, but there are others who are not directly belligerents, but using belligerent tactics differently. So, the definition of what is war and the converse of what is peace is not clear today, because you may think it is peace, but I don't know, some others say, oh, this is hybrid war or whatever else you call it. So, the fundamental definitions are changing. What is making? It is instrumentalizing all forms of connectivity, and we've been through it. It's weaponization of global public goods, I explained to you. It's making new issues into security concerns. Who thought that with your phone 10 years ago, if somebody had told me, or 15 years ago, this phone can be used to damage you thoroughly, it was a joke. But we've seen how it can be done. And finally, there are no platforms to address this today. Each one is doing what he wants, each one is working out what solutions are. There are no platforms where these can be addressed. So, that's what it means. Now, those who've done business know what we call such a thing. Some may call it disorder. The businessmen call it VUCA. VUCA means there is volatility, there is uncertainty, there is complexity, and there is ambiguity. And maybe it's a very sophisticated way of saying there's disorder, but they call it VUCA, and let's accept it as VUCA. So, what are the implications of VUCA for all of us? And that's perhaps where I will try and end it. What does it do? It's opened up security concerns where we never thought are security concerns. It's obviously, when you are uncertain, you will start hedging, and economists here know what hedging means and the implications of hedging. You will try to be friendly with this side and you will try to be friendly with that side. You won't take a view, you will not invest, you will think let me wait and see, etc., etc. There are implications for this hedging. Because Mr. Fink says that globalization is dead, I don't know whether it's dead or not, but this is says, and he has $10 billion of assets. So, bound to be that there will be a greater emphasis on localization. Countries like India are already ahead of the curve because we announced Atmanirbhar Bharat, and you can see that these are going to be times where we will try and focus on greater autonomy. So, we will want to be self-reliant in many ways that we were previously comfortable not being. There will be less globalization automatically if there is more localization. I don't know whether it will die, but there will be less. That's a thought. And you are not going to have easy choices anymore. Every choice is going to be suboptimal. Gone are the days of black and white, you are going to have grey choices. And those are going to be difficult for you to decide. Grey, which shade of grey, what it is. Hey, I don't like this grey, India did this, I don't like this. I mean, we are seeing this already among all of us also. Not understanding that in the grey zone, we need to understand that this is grey zone, you will not have black and white choices. And there will be premium on expertise and experience. That's why Ambassador Verma and I are today in greater demand than we were before. We have some expertise, some experience. So, how all this, what does this mean? We've disrupted, there are no body bags, I accept, for all the connectivity weaponization, there were no body bags coming directly, but these conflicts are as deadly, because what do they bank on? They say, what is the sanction? Sanction is to throttle or give the shock to another country's people. They will then try and disturb the status quo in that country or make their rulers change. So, what does this mean? You know, in war we thought civilians are non-combatants. They are supposed to be neutral. Don't touch them, don't hit them, don't kill them. Yet there is no such restriction. We are not saying civilians. In fact, civilians are the main combatants, because only when you really try and turn the screws there can you change governments and their approaches. We also were told that individuals were liable for their own actions, but today you are the son or the daughter or the son-in-law of somebody, you are also liable, because he is in power. I will do to you also some of the things that I need to do to him. So, individual liability, neutrality, defense of property, everything is gone. It can be circumscribed and eroded, because the bigger picture is important. The bigger picture is, you did something wrong, I can do everything and much more. I don't need to get global sanction. I have the authority, I have the weaponry. You will not see it, nobody else will know it, but I will do it to you. Right. Now, this is all very good to handle individual issues. Can somebody tell me, how are you going to handle some of these global concerns with this sort of an approach? How are you going to handle climate on a nationalist basis, on a basis of, now your regulations are not going to work even if you have very good regulations to to approach climate change in one area, somebody else doesn't, you are in trouble. So, look at this pandemic. How are you going to control pandemics purely within your borders without collaboration? How are you going to work in cyberspace on your own? How are you going to work in outer space on your own? And how are you going to work in high seas or jurisdictions beyond national jurisdictions? That is what we call in diplomats. Beyond national jurisdictions, how are you going to work? You can't do it by yourself. So, there rises the question, I want to leave that thought with you. We've gone down a path, we didn't know that was the path we were going down, we couldn't see it, now we know it. And how are we going to address the next wave of challenges? I think it's for academics, intellectuals like you. I am only a tired and a retired diplomat, so I will leave that thought question to thought leaders to decide on. Thank you very much for giving me the time to engage with all of you.
Sir, how do we define what is gated globalization in this day and era of globalization? Gated globalization.
Gated, right. So, gated globalization is something akin to, we have gated communities here. We all gate ourselves from the disorder outside, from the difficulties, the pollution, the large amount of problems outside. We cocoon ourselves. So, gated globalization, the thinking is that we may move towards a one world, multiple system approach. Some call it two system, some call it more. So, each system will not be able to interact with the other, but that one system will be large enough, like we survive in our nice gated communities. Gated globalization also, the thinking is exactly in a larger space you can survive without interaction, and what happens outside world, no noise. I also live in a gated community and I am very proud that there is no noise coming in. So, the outside disorder does not impinge on me. It is not a comfortable feeling for the world. That's what may happen even if it goes down that path.
One of the global connectivity which I feel now is dollar in terms of trade. So keeping the present scenario in view about rupee versus dollar, so I just want to ask you, you being a seasoned diplomat, can rupee withstand the onslaught of mighty dollar?
Look at it in another way.
And that is the countries who are imposing restrictions on Russian for trade and the use of other on the dollar, etc. They are about between 35 to 40. I understand there are 37, but let's give or take a few. 40 countries, yet they hold 55% of the global GNP is with them. So they are a formidable thing. Also, the dollar is the preferred currency of global transactions and will remain so, as another famous resident of this city, Dr. Subbarao, recently wrote in the Times of India that for foreseeable future the dollar will remain the currency of preference of global trade. That's a given. Having said that, if I have a lot of interests with Russia, it's not only trade, it's not only oil, but I also have defense purchases, I have strategic acquisitions. Ambassador Verma knows this much better than me. But if you have that, I have to find some way of payment. So there are workarounds. Remember, I told you what Lithuania did? Small little Lithuania. It found a workaround when the Chinese were putting restrictions on their trade. So workarounds are normal. Why look at India and say that we are doing workarounds post facto? There are countries who are doing workarounds in anticipation, preventive workarounds, maybe that's what we need to call them. So why is oil transactions not under unilateral coercive measures? Why is US buying uranium? And because energy is important for them, 15% of US energy comes from nuclear power. Therefore, use of uranium is important. Russia is a major supplier of uranium. They don't want to do it. So they are preventing that sort of a problem by working around it. So all that is being done in the bigger thing is workarounds will be done. This is small. The trade impact on this is not global. This is only a mechanism of an interim nature to try and address a bigger problem. Otherwise, there may be many other bigger problems. We are, some are innocent bystanders who have been affected by some legislation which was not of our making, which we were not consulted. We are now told that you either have to fall in line or otherwise. So we are working out workarounds. These are very small measures in the global picture. It will not change anything about the dollar and its supremacy, but it will provide us some space, some time, and that may be the thinking. These are only practical measures for pressing problems. We should look at it at that. It's not a big issue that we need to worry too much about.
You were telling about how we might come to an end of globalization now, like subsequently. Like globalization has also resulted in hyphenating political and economic scenarios. So in future, is there a chance of us seeing the end of the political order, the current political order also? Like, are we looking for a new political order with all that that's happening around?
I'm not a literature student, but there is a well-known saying of Alfred Lord Tennyson: old order changeth, yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. I'm not, again, I owe this to my mother. She was a professor of English who used to say all these things. Some of those are still in my mind, so I'm just using that. So change of order is normal. It takes sometimes. When globalization became the order, we didn't have an issue. We didn't even know. It happened just by that. And when it was coming apart, we didn't know it was coming apart. But there is still a debate whether that globalized order will totally come asunder or there will be some new. And orders take a long time, ma'am. They are unlike, you are all of a generation of the smartphone. And in the smartphone, when you want to update number 11.0, you just press. It says install. Boom! In 5 minutes it's installed. Unfortunately, political orders of an international nature are years in the making. So it's pretty clear that the old order is not able to adjust to new realities. But the new one will take some time, because there is a push and pull going on, and it will take quite some time before we get clarity on that. It could be gated globalization, as somebody said. It could be one world, two systems, as others say. Others think there should be a multipolar system where everybody should have a greater say, especially countries like ours who were not present at the time when the last order was being worked on. We now have an opportunity. So it's okay and to look at the brighter side. Maybe your generation will be better off than ours. We missed out on being global leaders, rule makers, rule shapers. You have that opportunity perhaps down the line.
We have spoken about unilateral punitive measures, right? In the context of India, historically or currently or in the foreseeable future, do we see India doing such things where we initiate a unilateral punitive measure? And the second question is, how in the past ideology also was a weapon of war. How do we see it being played in this whole interconnected system of other weapons of war?
It's a good
question. The second one I'll take first. Some people say it's a good thing that ideology is not part of this debate, because it would make people more difficult to adjust to new realities, because once ideologically you are predisposed to something, it becomes more difficult to be flexible. Diplomats like us, we do yoga, we are very malleable, we are used to adjusting to new realities. But if you have a ideology and you wear the coat of ideology, it becomes more difficult. So that's the thing. The US is saying that this is a battle between, they say, between democracies and dictatorship. I leave it for you to judge whether that is so. It's something is in the making. I will not answer that. But we've seen this before, saying the battle was between capitalism and communism. We know how many non-capitalist states were working on the side of capitalism. How many non-communist states were also willing to be supportive of communists elsewhere. So let's not go by terms which, when you look at in granular detail, it may not be as it is portrayed. As regards whether countries will do, don't you know the saying, while in Rome, do as the Romans do? So we are in an international community. I wear a suit despite it being hot. Why? Because diplomats all over the world tend to engage each other through a certain protocol. Therefore, if that is the dominant protocol, we adjust. I hope you got my hint.
Is it that in this new era, where there is a big change happening, India has emerged as the unsung hero for world peace? Because since last week, we are seeing Sri Lanka, then Pakistan, and out there US asking us to fight for peace. Number one. Unknowingly, we have being as the new hero for peace. True is it, or is it just a fact?
So it's best that we don't sing praises of ourselves. It's important to, I'm coming back to, now that you've asked that question, let me try and answer. First order of business is that we should allow our actions to speak for ourselves, and you've listed several actions, and they look formidable in terms of what is being done, what has been done, and what could be done. Because, for example, I read today that the world food prices are at a global high historically. People are going to have problems with wheat and with a whole series of other things. Opportunities may arise for countries like ours to be helpful to them in that format also. So these are opportunities that arise. I certainly see your point that India is well placed, but let time will itself say what is the outcome. We are well placed. We have a leadership which looks into these things, and we should not second guess what our governments are doing, because just to tell you, foreign policy is too complex for us in Hyderabad to sit and game it, because we don't know the entire whole set of linkages. There are linkages sometimes not in the public domain, sometimes not known, and it's very easy to, we are all nowadays, I see, apart from politics, international politics, everybody has an opinion. It's like we are all selectors of the Indian cricket team. Hey, he should not be batting at that stage, he should come one down, he should go opener. We are all doing that without knowledge of the issues. But from what you say, India is well positioned, it has the opportunity, it has the human and other resources to emerge much better than where we ended. So that's why I told through the young lady that the new order may not be as bad for us as the old one was. Maybe it's an opportunity for better prospects.
You know, having worked at the UN, I'm not going to.
With your definition of that, I didn't earn any marks because Deutschmark is now gone. But your argument, I think I have put it there, that global platforms that are available now are not adequate to handle issues of the complexity and the diversity that we are now facing. And that's a fair point, I think everybody acknowledges. But I wouldn't go to the extent that you would go.
You have listed the weapons of global connectivity. I have two questions, both connected to each other. First is, why didn't Russia choose these weapons? Why did they go to a physical war? And the second thing is, how do you see this asymmetry? That one side of the war is using a conventional war, and the other side is using these weapons of connectivity. Is there a weakness in either side?
I think both are out.
Questions. The management is extremely good with putting the right questions, so I appreciate those very much. Having said that, generals fight with the weapons they have. That's normal. If you tell a general to fight a battle, he sees what is the weapon I have. So perhaps the weaponry available with the Russians at that stage, they thought this was the best weapon. Perhaps. I don't know. Answer to this you should have asked last time question. Because you had an expert who knows the Russian leadership, he would have answered it better. But to me it looks that that generals generally choose the weapons they think will lead them to. There is no general who will choose a weapon who he thinks is weak and go into battle. So let's accept that. Sure, they may not have, for example, banking or SWIFT system. There is no comparison with what is available to the Russians with the Americans. And this effort, by the way, these unilateral measures have been in the making for months. They acknowledged it. We were planning. That's how they were able to act very fast. If it was 2 years ago, if you would see how the Americans and the Europeans were addressing each other in a different language, not trusting each other, not certain whether they would be partners. Today it's all changed. They are all working so much in unison. So obviously they have put in some backroom effort which all of us don't see it, but it's there. And they decided, so it's like if the management of Manthan has to choose between two weapons, what will they choose? You started by saying, because in this day and age, if you can sit in your rooms, not put lives of your people in danger and still cause havoc to the other side, it's sagacity that they will use that. The other side perhaps doesn't have those weapons, or not in adequate measure, or they didn't think that the weapons they have would not succeed quickly. There could be many reasons. I don't know those, but could one of these or all of these together could be reasons. But you're right that this new dimension going forward will be part of every armory. So any next form of conflict, you will see these weaponry being used.
And where is India placed in this list?
Again, a very tough question. I must confess, I am not a soothsayer, but it's a good question, and I think we need to look at ourselves. The more connected you are, the more amenable you are to such issues, and therefore security in those areas should be a primary concern for all of us, starting from the government to all of us. And it's pretty clear that we have some paths to traverse as yet, because look, when the Mumbai attacks took place, you saw our policemen did not have SWAT teams going there. They just had batons like lathis, etc., with poorly clad armory going in, because we never thought that this is how attacks take place, or cities taking over a hotel, etc. So we learnt at great cost then that policing is important. Now this is a wake up call. So Ukraine is a canary in the coal mine for India too, to see what is happening and to take measures.
You know, it seems to me that there is a little bit of contradiction in this whole thing. For a country to gain dominance over others, it must globalize, because it must have influence, its products, its resources, its services must be used. But to defend oneself, one should not globalize, right? Is this not? So if countries start defending themselves, and by not globalizing, they're not only taking away the power of that country, and small countries can also get such power over large countries without any real capital investment. So for example, if I send out one maybe Android update, which can shut down all the phones in the United States, that will run the country into chaos when no one can call anybody, no communication systems happen. So will it not reduce wars in the longer term?
So there is a seeming contradiction that you're pointing out,
but it's not exactly so, because there are individual countries cannot do this except if you are a node in connectivity terms, because if you are a node, everything runs through you, so it's easy for you to block it. If you are not a node, it's like the hub and spoke. If you are the hub, everything can be checked here. If you are the spoke, you can't do very much, because you come here, the hub will stop you. So there are only today maybe 3 big nodes of connectivity: the US, in some measure the European Union, because after the dollar, the euro is the largest currency, and for other reasons too. They are aligned so closely, so you may think that they are all both one, but they are theoretically separate. And the third is China. The rest do not have the capacity to be nodes today. They do have capacities of a different kind, like I explained to you, Turkey. It used transit. It's not a big hub otherwise, but you can use. India has many such potential nodes. how it develops, how we can nurture those, will decide our future also of becoming a connectivity hub that he had told in different ways in conventional terms, but you can do this. It takes time. It's not in the near future. These are longer term plans, and we need to, it's not possible for very small countries to disrupt the way you are saying. It's not generally possible. In theory it's possible, but when you go to the hub from the spoke, they will block you there, finished. You will not be able to go around there, but those guys in the hub can do everything to everyone else. Becoming a hub or network is the way forward for countries like ours who have aspirations of leadership in the longer term.
Yes, sir. So can you hear me now? Yes, sir. So I have two questions. One is, how has the COVID pandemic affected globalization? And also, the second question is, if globalization is slowly coming to an end, so does it mean that every country is going to start doing their own thing? If that's the case, who is going to be the global policeman? As in, who is going to set the standard as to how are things going to get done?
COVID has impacted in many ways. I didn't give examples because these are well known. How health equipment, PPEs, how they were weaponized is known. I'll just give you one example and perhaps that will explain the bigger picture for you. Australia and China had the best of economic ties, trade ties. If you look at their trade before and during and after, the answer is there. What did Australia do? All its cardinal issue with the Chinese took against it was, it said, let's go to the WHO and find out what is the source of origin of this pandemic. On the face of it, it looks a reasonable thing for a country to ask. However, the Chinese felt that this was targeted towards them, and a raft, what Lithuania, I mean Lithuania is a smaller example, so I gave that, but you could have 50 examples between China and Australia. Before that, China and Australia had trade ties of such a nature that you will be shocked. Just so I would suggest, just have a look at the trade ties before and after, and you will see what COVID can do or what health concerns can do in this thing. The other one about policemen, again, I think we should stop using the language of the 19th and 20th century. I think it looks more sophisticated to use nodes, hubs, they're doing the same work. Clouds, checks, they're doing, because all they're doing is the wiring of globalization is going through somebody. He is the policeman. You may not call him by policeman. You will say guardian. It's the same. It depends on how you use these terms. You are using police terms because in your mind, security is police. In the new world that is coming up, security is the technical engineer. So just start using, get used to different terminology.
Hi sir, I'm Praveen from Unsung University Journalism. Your dad's portrait hangs proudly there. So please do visit, drop in some time and please visit us there. My question is, while we are not a global aggressor, we would like to protect ourselves from similar occurrences. Are we in a position to defend ourselves from weaponized various connectivities of the globe? And are we also working on any offensive skills, just in case, because one of the doctrines is offensive defense or defense weapons. Thank you so much.
So, these are all, it's a shock to everybody. Everybody is working on it. Let's be clear. And but the biggest offensive is to ensure that you work on policies which do not attract this sort of a thing. That's the first level. That's what diplomats do. If they fail, then the next level comes, and the next level comes, and the next level comes. And I'm sure countries like ours, which have aspirations to be global nodes, will be addressing these issues. But let me tell you, in the New World Order, there is no absolute safety for everybody. Let's acknowledge this. There is no 100% safety that you will say, oh, you know, I am safe from everybody. There will always be chinks in the armor which can be worked out. But as a country which recognizes this, I am certain they are working. It's 2 years since I left the government in April. I am not privy to what they are working or not. As I said, this question also should have been asked last time. Somebody who was there 6 months ago could have answered you better.
You see, Mumbai had an unprecedented power blockage after Galwan incident. Would you link it to this?
I don't know. This is same argument goes that Karachi Stock Exchange crashed. I don't know. So this thing is uncertain. And we talked about Stuxnet. It is 10 years since then. Nobody knows what happened. So it's not proper to speculate. These are serious issues. We need to address them and to try and do it. And I can give you, for every example you give, I can give you 2 examples and say, I don't know. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Akbaruddin. Question out of the syllabus. I know from my HPS days that you were a hockey player. Let's go back to your career. And can you give us some goals which you feel that you have scored, which were worth knowing to the group like Manthan? We would like to enjoy that.
This is a difficult question. So, there are many, some were mentioned. For 20 years, we are trying to list a global terrorist. It didn't work many times, including me. I tried once, you know, like they say, a new broom tries everything. So when I went in 2016, I also tried. It didn't work. We were fortuitous. It happened later on. That's one thing about Masood Azhar and his listing. Why it is difficult is that these sanctions committees, everybody has a veto. So in the Security Council, 5 have a veto. In the sanctions committees, 15 have a veto. So you can understand how difficult it is to navigate with 15. Everybody wanting pound of flesh. In diplomacy, as you know, there are no free lunches. That's one. I can tell you Article 370, after Article 370, for the first time in more than 50 years, the Chinese, for the first time in their history, decided to pursue it in the Security Council. You can understand how difficult it is to block a discussion. We've seen now Russia, being a permanent member of the Security Council, couldn't block a discussion, couldn't block a vote. Even before the crisis, when they said we don't want a discussion, there was a vote, they lost. Just imagine a country which is not a member of the Security Council, which is taking on a permanent member. Pakistan is not an issue for us. It's yesterday's problem. Tomorrow's problem and today's problem is China. And it did take us a lot of effort and global networking to get that done. I am just like a Mukhota. I was there in the trenches fighting that battle. There are people all over the world. Indian diplomacy was working, and we owe it to those unknown warriors who actually succeeded in pushing back.
Thank you. Thank you, Akbar, for a lovely session. I wanted to divert and bring your attention to another very evident weaponization that has happened in society today, where the politics of the nation itself, or the political class of the nation itself, is weaponizing the lack of knowledge as well as the lack of real history of the nation against its own people for their specific agendas. Now, how does a nation handle that? Because it doesn't require an external force. In the name of something else, you weaponize the word nationalism, you weaponize the word of patriotism, you have weaponized democracy, and you have weaponized your entire politics. How do we handle that?
So I must confess, as I said,
I am a tired and retired diplomat. And for 40 years, my area of expertise has been international relations. If I venture into other areas, it's be like the Indian cricket team selectors. I am telling about something I have no knowledge, to be fair. I have some knowledge of international issues, so you will see even on international issues, I generally confine it to bigger trends, global organizations, because the world is very complex for us to delve into areas where we don't know. You've raised a question. I suggest Manthan can have the next session with somebody who is an expert on this, and he or she may.
Kautilya school also, I expect Kautilya school to have that expertise on policy.
We are a small little organization. I'm grateful that you have remembered it. We don't make politicians, unfortunately, despite somebody saying this. We are trying to make people understand and comprehend better public issues, and this was if you see, that's a outcome of what we are looking at, how sanctions impact people, how weapons we didn't know are impacting us, etc., etc. There will be experts of this nature who are best suited, and you will excuse me if I pass that question, because I am no expert in these areas. I have some expertise. I am ready to answer any question on my area of limited expertise, which is also now a little dated.
Good evening, and thank you so much for such an illuminating and engrossing talk. I have a follow-up question on the management question. The weapons of global connectivity are becoming more and more potent. There are anonymous actors and there are known actors. So the question really is, how long can the known actors push this game before the target, let's say Russia in this case, starts adopting strategic weapons? And therefore, is there a risk, and how can you calibrate this, and where do you
like leukemia in your body?
So this is not an exact science. And you've
Again, touched upon a neurological issue, which is very important. These are not, this is a first ever effort of its kind, and clearly there is a pushback, and all of us are also part of that pushback. I certainly feel that we need to say things which others are not saying, but we need to say it in a manner which is agreeable. So what you are saying, there is a real danger, sure. We've seen insinuations of other weaponry that can that has been mentioned. So that's what political sagacity and diplomatic wisdom demands, that you need to work out solutions, otherwise the threats are such that it could have escalatory ladders are very easy to climb up, very difficult to climb down, and that's why repeatedly India is saying we don't want to side with you or you on this, because you're going up, all you're doing is condemning each other and going up the escalatory ladder. And there are potent weapons, as you said, there are even conventional weapons which are very potent, which haven't come into play as yet, and it does behove countries to work this out, and it's normal. This sort of a situation hasn't been faced in their lifetimes also, of leaders, in our lifetime certainly, but in their lifetimes as leaders. So it is best that they wind down and address these issues. Unfortunately, as I said, we do not have a forum to address this. So you are having interlopers trying to do it. Turkey is saying, I will provide a forum. Israel is saying, I will do quiet diplomacy. These one-off things are okay, but we need institutional mechanism, and we acknowledge the Security Council or the UN. It's become a forum for public diplomacy, not of quiet diplomacy. What is required now is quiet diplomacy of a nature that needs to tone down these things. We hope and pray that the leadership on both these sides has the sagacity and the wisdom to continue to address. There will be differences, but address differences not by escalating them, but by trying to manage them. And people have managed differences, wars for long. It's not new. The Cold War was continuing for several years. There was no friendship or love lost between them. So what we have today is a marriage in which there is no more love between those two partners, but a marriage where they are not yet ready to part. Let's hope that that small glimmer of hope where they are not ready to part may provide an opportunity for them to engage and try and reduce, and in these circumstances it behoves all of us to try and bring down the temperature.